The holiday roast was fresh from the oven, yet the chilly atmosphere inside that dining room felt entirely freezing. I know this down to the second because my morning commenced at 4 a.m., carefully prepping the meat, blending the spices, and rotating the roasting pan every half hour. I had transported the entire multi-course feast 30 miles across the county line in my old sedan with the heater blasting so the side dishes wouldn't lose their warmth. I had meticulously arranged the dining space using the premium linens, the embroidered ones I purchased for my mother several winters back, which she reserved exclusively for distinguished visitors. I had even pressed them into elegant geometric shapes. No one requested this effort. Nobody acknowledged it. Our meal was only a quarter finished when my mother glared across the table, dropped her silver utensil, and uttered those sharp words. "You are merely a financial drain on us. You always have been." My brother slammed his hand down and chuckled. It was not a tense or nervous giggle. It was a genuine, mocking laugh. At least I bring real honor to this household. My father kept his gaze fixed directly on his plate. I quietly laid my fork down, smoothed the fabric napkin, slid my chair backward, retrieved my heavy winter coat from the brass peg near the entryway, and walked away. There was no shouting match, no weeping, no dramatic door slamming, just the faint, definitive snap of the latch closing behind my back. But here is the hidden truth that none of them comprehended. I had secretly been covering the monthly mortgage for that very structure over their heads for nearly a decade. And the sequence of events set in motion over the subsequent weeks would ultimately strip them of absolutely everything. Welcome to Quiet Justice Tales. I am the narrator, a certified public accountant operating in a quiet borough within Pennsylvania. This is the chronicle of how my biological relatives utilized me as a personal banking machine for years, labeled me a heavy drain during a celebratory feast, and subsequently discovered the harsh reality when that cash flow completely evaporates. If a narrative regarding self-respect and establishing firm boundaries resonates with your own journey, please leave a comment below and ensure you hit the subscribe button. I was barely 15 when I captured the top prize in the regional mathematics tournament. Absolute first place. A gleaming trophy featuring a small metallic plate inscribed with my full name and the specific calendar year. I transported it back on the afternoon transit bus, cradling it securely in my lap throughout the journey so the base wouldn't clatter against the seat. The moment I crossed the threshold of our house, the kitchen was filled with the aroma of baked dough. My mother had ordered multiple large pizzas from the local pizzeria to mark my brother making the secondary sports squad. He was 17 and had managed to secure a spot as an alternate player. My mother stood by the counter partitioning the slices onto paper platters, radiating pride. Your sibling exerts such immense effort. Not every child possesses the coordination to make the roster, you see. I placed my hard-earned award on the counter right beside the greasy cardboard boxes. Nobody glanced toward it. We consumed our dinner focusing entirely on his practice regime, his athletic mentor, and his customized footwear that cost well over $100, which I subsequently discovered my father had charged to a line of credit he lacked the resources to settle. Following the meal, I cleared the counter and cleaned the pans. That trophy remained on the counter for several days before I finally transferred it to my small bedroom. The cramped space adjacent to the laundry room where the vibrating appliance rattled through the drywall every single evening. My brother's bedroom was the grandest chamber in the entire house. He enjoyed his personal television set and a functional lock attached to his door frame. My space featured a single window overlooking the corrugated metal side of the neighboring structure. That identical month, I overheard my mother explaining to a neighbor over the wooden fence that my brother was destined to receive a full athletic grant for higher education. He never did. He was officially dismissed from the squad 3 months afterward for skipping an excessive number of mandatory training sessions. I maintained total composure and uttered nothing. I acquired a piece of wisdom at 15 that the vast majority of individuals discover much later in life. Absolute silence can function either as a defensive weapon or a confining cage. I had not yet determined which function it would serve for me. I attended the state university utilizing a scholastic grant that sustained 70% of my tuition fees. I balanced 2 separate employment positions to accumulate the remaining balance. A morning shift managing inventory at the college bookstore, followed by weekend hours at a local corporate tax office in the city center. I consumed a tremendous volume of basic peanut butter spreads. I finished my degree in precisely 4 terms, earning a diploma in corporate finance with absolutely zero outstanding debt. My brother enrolled in the local community program for a single term, proclaimed it was completely beneath his talents, and retreated right back into our parents' dark basement to concentrate fully on his corporate venture. His grand enterprise consisted of retailing customized graphic shirts via the internet. It survived roughly 4 months. The digital storefront remains active online today. Statistically speaking, it has recorded 0 purchases since the year 2017. When I reached 24, 2 years following my graduation, while employed at my initial corporate accounting position, I received an urgent communication from my mother. My father had severely damaged 3 distinct muscles in his lumbar region while operating on a commercial building site. State compensation sustained the medical operation itself. It failed to sustain their daily living costs. We desperately require financial assistance, the voice pleaded. I was generating $36,000 annually at that initial firm. I immediately initiated a recurring transfer of $800 every single month. That sum represented more than a quarter of my total net compensation. I survived on cheap instant noodles 5 nights out of 7. I bypassed midday meals entirely. I acquired my professional attire from secondary thrift shops and altered the trousers myself. When I inquired whether my brother was offering any financial assistance to the household, my mother's tone immediately turned icy. Your sibling is actively constructing an empire. You simply possess a standard job. That constituted the very first check. I drafted the document at my small wooden table within my studio residence, the one featuring an old heater that clanked loudly at 2 in the morning. I penned my signature, secured the envelope paper, and deposited it into the metal mailbox situated on the street corner. Throughout the subsequent 8 years, I would systematically dispatch 312 additional checks. 8 years represents an exceptionally long duration to serve as an oblivious family balance sheet. By the 3rd year, I had secured a promotion to senior financial analyst at a reputable accounting firm in the heart of town. By the 5th year, I successfully earned my certified public accountant credentials, studying the dense material late at night after completing full days organizing other citizens' financial documents, passing the rigorous exam on my very first attempt. By the 8th year, my corporate compensation reached $58,000, and I had established an independent consulting venture managing private ledger books that generated an additional $15,000 annually. On paper, my financial health was exceptional. In actual reality, every single month, I generated the exact same payments. $1,200 directed to the primary home loan, $340 for my father's medical policy extension, and $180 covering the standard household utilities. Plus the semi-annual municipal property assessments. Over 8 full years, that aggregate expenditure reached approximately $186,000. I retain the precise figure because I am a trained accountant. I documented every single decimal point. In the meantime, my brother's professional resume resembled a silent cemetery of discarded interests. Venture number 1, custom apparel, deceased within 120 days. Venture number 2, speculative digital currency trading, which completely erased $8,000 of our mother's retirement fund. Venture number 3, a mobile culinary concept that never advanced beyond a colorful collection of ideas taped to his basement wall space. His aggregate financial injection to the family household over those 8 years totaled absolute zero. Not diminished, not minimal, literally zero. Yet my mother's internal narrative never shifted for a moment. My brother is destined to achieve massive greatness. The narrator simply manipulates numbers on a page. That particular December, I paused at the municipal mail facility to dispatch a regular corporate client's filing extension. Resting on the counter space right beside the automated stamp dispenser, another patron had inadvertently left a collection of holiday greeting cards. The uppermost card appeared instantly familiar. It was the official family portrait. 3 distinct individuals, my mother, my father, and my brother, smiling broadly in front of the brick fireplace I had personally financed to keep burning. I functioned strictly as a silent corporate benefactor, never an actual member of the unit. The local religious community gathering occurred in late October, roughly 4 weeks prior to the major holiday feast. My mother had automatically volunteered my services to supply 2 homemade desserts, apple and pecan, without bothering to consult me first. I prepared the baked goods regardless. The moment I stepped into the communal social hall, my mother was already dominating the conversation near the beverage station, resting one hand firmly on my brother's shoulder as though she were displaying a highly decorated prize animal at the agricultural exposition. "Pastor, have you properly met my brilliant son? He is a sophisticated visionary currently engineering an incredibly lucrative enterprise." My brother smoothly pulled a custom card from his rear pocket, featuring thick embossed lettering, representing an entity titled his private enterprises. This was his 4th consecutive business model, focused on purchasing inexpensive undeveloped land tracts and rapidly flipping them for profit. He completely omitted the reality that he possessed 0 liquid capital, 0 actual land deeds, and 0 structural strategy beyond a brief digital tutorial he had viewed concerning real estate investments. The minister nodded with polite reserve. An acquaintance standing near the refreshment table inquired, "And what about your daughter?" My mother barely shifted her gaze. "Oh, her. She handles standard bookkeeping. She is doing fine." She uttered the word "fine" with the exact level of enthusiasm one uses to describe unmemorable weather on a completely forgettable day. I stood silently adjacent to the greens platter, clutching my 2 desserts and an empty paper plate I had no desire to fill. I quietly placed the baked goods on the table surface, gathered my leather handbag, and exited toward the outdoor parking lot. Not a single person observed my departure. Throughout the commute home, I paused at a convenience store along the highway and purchased a standard black coffee with 2 packets of sugar. I remained seated inside my vehicle in that dark parking lot for 40 minutes. I did not shed tears. I was not plotting retaliation. I was simply engaged in an exercise I had executed my entire existence without consciously naming it, recalculating the ledger. Every few calendar cycles, a professional accountant must scrutinize the financial ledger and determine whether a prolonged liability remains worth the ongoing expenditure. I was seriously beginning to question the math. On the morning of the holiday feast, at precisely 5 a.m., I stood inside my personal kitchen space with a massive bird that had been soaking overnight in a large container. I prepared every single element completely from scratch. Fluffy potatoes whipped with genuine cream, fresh green beans tossed with sliced mushrooms, and a fruit reduction I boiled from raw berries because my mother once remarked that the pre-packaged alternative resembled institutional gelatin from a medical facility. By midday, the interior of my vehicle carried the aroma of a high-end restaurant kitchen. I drove the familiar route to the family residence, transported the heavy food containers up the wooden entryway steps in multiple structured trips, and granted myself access using the spare key I had retained since my college years. The residence was entirely silent. My father reeled in his specialized lounge chair with a heat element applied directly to his back, observing a sports match with the audio completely deactivated. My mother was upstairs completing her attire. My brother remained completely unconscious down in the basement level. I organized the dining table, cleansed the kitchen surfaces, and modified the climate control system. I possessed the absolute right to perform that action, given that I settled the electrical invoice every single month. I opened the fabric linens and positioned them carefully beside each setting. I verified the internal oven setting twice. At 2 in the afternoon, my brother emerged from the lower stairs clad in a loose sweatshirt and fleece trousers, his hair completely unstyled, and collapsed heavily into a dining chair. "When do we eat?" My mother materialized immediately behind his position and rested an affectionate hand on his shoulder. "Rest yourself, darling. You must be completely exhausted from your endeavors." He had literally been deep in slumber until 90 seconds prior. I observed him settle comfortably into the very chair I had systematically sanitized moments ago. No one offered a word of appreciation. No one inquired if I required any assistance. No one directed a single sentence toward me whatsoever. In the field of corporate finance, there exists a specific phrase utilized for instances when 2 distinct values fail to balance perfectly, unreconciled. The corresponding debit and credit entries both exist within the ledger system, yet the fundamental balance is demonstrably incorrect. And until you identify the core error, the entirety of the financial record remains compromised. Standing silently inside that kitchen environment, clutching a metal serving implement, watching my biological family assemble around a massive feast that I had personally prepared and fully financed, I comprehended that particular word for the very first time as something far deeper than a mere professional concept. My mother elevated her glass filled with inexpensive wine. I desire to formally express how incredibly grateful I am for my wonderful son. He continuously brings immense pride to this entire household. My brother lowered his head in a highly theatrical display of false humility. Thank you, Mother. I am actually in the process of finalizing a massive transaction. I have my sights set on several key parcels located just beyond the highway corridor. Real estate represents the sector where sophisticated capital migrates. He uttered this grandiose statement while consuming poultry that I had spent hours roasting, while seated inside a residential structure whose primary mortgage note I settled every single month. My father masticated his food silently, keeping his eyes directed entirely downward. My mother shifted her gaze toward my position. And what about you? What exactly do you possess to be grateful for this year? I parted my lips to speak. I am deeply grateful for, you are simply an ongoing burden to us. You always have been. She delivered the statement with the exact same casual demeanor she would use to mention the vegetables required additional seasoning. Completely matter of fact, as though it were a universal truth everyone recognized but no one typically bothered to voice dynamically. My brother burst into laughter. It wasn't a nervous, polite chuckle designed to mask discomfort. It was a genuine, full-throated laugh of absolute agreement. At least I bring real honor to this household. My father placed his fork down flat against the table. He refused to look up. He uttered no words. He simply ceased chewing his food entirely. I stared down at the fabric linen resting in my lap, the exact piece I had folded into an elegant fan shape 2 hours prior. I laid my utensil down on the left side, not the right. The specific placement one employs when they are entirely finished and have no intention of returning. I folded the linen neatly a single time, placed it adjacent to my plate, pushed my chair back from the table, stood up on my feet, walked directly to the primary entryway, and retrieved my outerwear from the wooden peg, the simple gray wool jacket I discovered at a secondary charity shop for $12. Where do you think you are going? My mother's tone carried far more irritation than genuine motherly concern. Our dinner service is not yet concluded. I offered no verbal response. I stepped across the threshold into the outdoor air, pulled the heavy door firmly closed behind me, and walked directly toward my vehicle. The engine fired up instantly on the very first turn of the key. I backed out of the concrete driveway, passing my father's ancient work vehicle with the deflated tire that no one had ever bothered to repair. I completed the long drive home in absolute, unbroken silence. No audio broadcast, no mobile interactions, zero tears shed, just the dark asphalt road ahead and the steady hum of the climate control blower. That represented the absolute final holiday feast I would ever experience inside that residential structure. Exactly 2 weeks following that holiday gathering, I sat quietly on my living room sofa and accessed my digital banking application. I possessed 3 distinct automated transfers established many years ago. $1,200 for the residential mortgage note on the initial day of every calendar cycle, $340 for my father's supplemental medical coverage on the 15th, and $180 covering the localized energy utilities. 3 independent automated transactions. 3 simple digital interactions to completely dissolve them. I engaged the primary option. Confirm transaction. Yes. I engaged the secondary option. Confirm transaction. Yes. The tertiary option, yes. The entire process required less than 60 seconds to complete. 8 full years of intense financial subservience, completely terminated with 3 simple touches of a display screen. I closed the software program and placed my mobile unit down on the wooden surface. For the absolute first time in nearly a decade, my personal checking balance was destined to remain exactly where it belonged at the conclusion of the monthly cycle. On the 12th subsequent day, my phone began to vibrate. It was my father. The mortgage payment, the bank dispatched an official notification. It indicates the monthly transfer is late. There is a significant financial penalty applied. His vocal delivery carried that hyper-cautious cadence. The specific tone he consistently utilized when he recognized he was navigating my mother's territory and desperately wished to avoid triggering an emotional explosion. Why exactly is the home loan remaining unpaid this month? Go ahead and inquire with your golden child. Total silence ensued on the line. I could faintly discern the audio from the television set operating in the background. Some commercial broadcast with ringing sound effects. You cannot simply walk away from. I absolutely can, and I am currently doing so. I terminated the connection, reclined flat across my sofa cushions, and stared directly at the plaster ceiling. My residential space was modest, measuring just over 400 square feet if you included the personal washroom facilities. But it belonged entirely to me. The legal lease document bore my exclusive signature. The electrical utility was registered in my name, the digital connectivity, the residential protection policy, and the textile doormat that read, "Welcome." Everything belonged to me. I had paid for every single item inside this room using capital I personally generated. And for the first time in 8 full years, I was not going to transmit a single dollar to a household where my name didn't even qualify to appear on the annual holiday greeting card. 8 years, 312 independent financial checks. Not a single time did anyone within my biological family utter a basic word of gratitude. And when I finally ceased the transfers, the initial communication wasn't intended to verify my personal well-being. It was strictly to inquire regarding the outstanding mortgage payment. If you have ever been the invisible pillar keeping everything structural while others claimed the credit, you comprehend precisely what that hollow silence on the line signified. Stay closely tuned because the information I uncovered next shifted the entire dynamic permanently. My mother's organized social retaliation initiated exactly 3 days afterward. She didn't contact me directly. Instead, she initiated communications with every single person within her social sphere. An aunt residing in the next town, a cousin over in the valley, an acquaintance from the congregation, the minister's spouse, and the retail clerk at the local market who had recognized our family unit for over 2 decades. The narrative she spun was clean, heavily practiced, and utterly destructive to my reputation. The narrator completely abandoned their aging family. The father is physically incapacitated. The mother possesses zero personal revenue, and the child simply terminated all support without warning. Zero context provided. Zero acknowledgement of 8 consecutive years of consistent financial checks. Zero reference to the word burden uttered during the holiday feast. Simply the specific version of reality my mother desperately desired to propagate. My mobile unit illuminated constantly with incoming recorded messages. 4 times a day, sometimes 5. Your actions are actively destroying your father's health. The entire congregation is praying for our deliverance. How can you exhibit such cruelty toward your own mother? I reviewed every single recording exactly 1 time. I generated a fresh digital spreadsheet, creating columns for the specific calendar date, the caller identity, the precise timestamp, a concise summary, and the emotional register of the voice. I logged every single communication exactly like an accountant logs a basic corporate transaction, purely factual, entirely devoid of personal commentary. Following the entry, I permanently erased the voice file. I refused to return a single call. On the 5th day of this campaign, my brother initiated contact. This represented the first time he had spoken to me in 3 full years. His voice sounded incredibly constricted, like an individual gripping a mobile unit and a deep resentment simultaneously. You desperately need to return to this house and correct this situation immediately. Correct exactly what? Absolutely everything. Mother is completely losing her composure. Father is unable to sleep at night. The financial institution keeps calling our line. That sounds precisely like a localized family issue. You are an official part of this family. Am I truly? Because during the holiday feast, Mother explicitly stated I was a financial burden. You laughed out loud at the statement. Father maintained total silence. That sequence of behaviors doesn't resemble a functional family dynamic to me. He immediately severed the connection. I systematically added his communication to my active spreadsheet log. December 14, 11:47 a.m. Total duration 2 minutes. Vocal tone highly aggressive. Content focused entirely on making demands. Every single financial quarter, I pulled my official consumer credit profile. It wasn't driven by paranoia. It was an entrenched professional practice. When you operate as a certified public accountant, your credit standing functions as a core component of your professional credentials. Corporate clients trust you with their internal ledgers. Financial lenders trust your mathematical accuracy. I scrutinized my files during the second week of January. The official credit bureau screen loaded on my personal computer inside my apartment space. I scrolled past the routine data entries. Academic obligations fully settled. Vehicle financing fully settled. Credit utilization hovering at a healthy 9%. And then I froze entirely. A completely fresh account entry, a major home loan, $47,000 secured by the residential real estate located at the family address. Established exactly 4 months ago. My legal name was listed as the primary borrower. I had never authorized a secondary mortgage document in my entire existence. I am a financial professional. Numbers do not induce panic within me even when they are completely erroneous. Especially when they are demonstrably fraudulent. I captured a digital screenshot, saved the comprehensive file as a document, established a fresh storage space on my desktop, and labeled it with the house address. I secured the file, opened a pristine data spreadsheet. Column A, date, column B, information source, column C, specific finding, column D, precise action executed. I typed the very first record entry. January 12, Credit Bureau Report. Unauthorized secondary mortgage loan, $47,000, family residential address. Digital screenshot secured. Original document fully archived. Someone had systematically utilized my identity, my personal signature, my excellent credit standing, and there existed only one residential location that specific loan was structurally anchored to. I contacted the financial cooperative the subsequent morning. The dedicated loan administrator, a professional named Janet, was exceptionally courteous and careful with her language. Client, I can certainly retrieve the original lending application for your review, but I must completely validate your personal identity first. I provided her with every single required metric. My social security digits, my exact date of birth, and my mother's maiden family name. She officially confirmed that I was precisely the individual I claimed to be. The loan application had been presented in physical person, Janet explained. Officially authenticated by a localized legal notary. I will forward a physical duplication to your residential address via standard post. Expect it within 5 to 7 business cycles. I remarked that such an arrangement would be perfectly acceptable. 5 days later, a thick paper package arrived at my door. I distributed the complex legal documents across my kitchen table surface, illuminated the high-powered reading fixture I utilized for independent contract work, and systematically analyzed every single page. The application paperwork was incredibly detailed. An individual who comprehended my personal data exceptionally well had completed the forms. My current corporate employer, my exact monthly revenue, my standard apartment location, except the primary residence listed on the forms was the family address, not my actual apartment. The final signature rested on page 11. At an initial glance, the handwriting appeared remarkably close, exceptionally close. But I am an individual who executes my personal signature hundreds of times every single month on official tax filings and corporate client communications. I comprehend my personal handwriting the exact way an experienced woodworker recognizes the specific grain pattern of a distinct piece of lumber. The initial character in my name loops distinctly to the left side. The fraudulent signature on this document looped aggressively to the right. It always has. Positioned directly beneath that forged signature rested a legal notary stamp. Local notary, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I recognized that specific name instantly. He had been a direct classmate of my brother during their high school years. They had operated on the exact same secondary sports squad, the very team my brother was dismissed from. This individual operated a small independent notary office on Main Street right adjacent to the local hardware storefront. I placed the document packet down on the table, retrieved my mobile device, and immediately contacted my senior partner at the accounting firm. "Partner, I urgently require the services of a legal counselor, not a standard corporate tax attorney, but a specialist in criminal defense." My partner remained completely silent for a brief moment. Then she spoke. "This situation pertains directly to your biological relatives, correct? It pertains directly to a completely forged signature on a $47,000 financial loan. I will personally make an introductory call this very evening." The attorney maintained a professional office space in the city center, 35 miles to the east. He was hovering in his mid-50s, featuring silver hair at his temples with a working desk completely buried beneath legal pads and a ceramic container that read "Due Process." My partner had maintained a professional relationship with him for over 15 years. I sat directly across from his desk with the fraudulent mortgage paperwork, the official credit bureau profile, and my physical accounting certification, the document bearing my authentic signature, laid out side by side for direct comparison. He scrutinized the documents for 10 unbroken minutes without uttering a word. Then he leaned back in his leather chair. "A completely clear-cut case: signature forgery, identity theft, and corporate bank fraud. If you choose to formally pursue criminal charges, this enters federal jurisdiction. What occurs regarding the outstanding loan itself? You immediately submit an official identity theft affidavit with the Federal Trade Commission, formally dispute the fraudulent account with all 3 primary credit reporting bureaus, and the financial institution will initiate a formal internal review. The loan file gets flagged immediately. Allows 60 to 90 days for a final structural resolution. And what becomes of the physical residential structure?" He paused briefly. "If the secondary mortgage note is proven to be entirely fraudulent, the financial institution completely unwinds the transaction. But if the primary mortgage note also enters total default, the specific loan you have been financing out of pocket, then the real estate property officially enters the foreclosure process. It will unquestionably default. I have completely terminated all monthly payments." The attorney looked at me, not with an expression of moral judgment, but with the distinct gaze of a professional who deeply respected basic arithmetic. "In that scenario, the residential structure will proceed directly to a public sheriff's auction, likely within the next 6 months." I nodded my head in absolute agreement. That identical afternoon, I submitted a comprehensive identity theft affidavit with the Federal Trade Commission using my personal computer from my apartment. I initiated a total credit freeze with all 3 primary credit reporting bureaus. I drafted an official corporate dispute communication, printed the document, authenticated it using my genuine signature, and dispatched it via certified mail directly to the financial cooperative. Following that, I prepared a simple dinner, a grilled cheese sandwich and hot soup, and consumed it quietly on my sofa in complete silence. 60 to 90 days. I was entirely capable of waiting out the clock. I had been waiting patiently for 32 years. The attorney's independent review progressed far more rapidly than I initially anticipated. The financial cooperative cooperated fully with the investigation. They possessed their own corporate liability vulnerabilities to manage, and a completely fraudulent legal notarization represented a massive institutional crisis for them as well. Within 3 weeks, the bank successfully traced the exact path of the $47,000. The funds had been electronically transferred directly from the new loan account into a commercial business checking repository at an entirely separate financial institution, registered to a newly formed limited liability company. The initials stood directly for my brother and his notary accomplice. The attorney forwarded the official financial disbursement logs to my office. I analyzed the records at my kitchen table the exact way I process all corporate financial records, slowly, utilizing a sharp pencil and a fresh yellow legal pad. $18,000 had been directed toward a down payment on an undeveloped parcel of land located in a rural county. A specific piece of real estate that had subsequently collapsed 40% in aggregate market value due to a completely rejected municipal rezoning petition. $22,000 had been utilized to acquire a brand new pickup truck registered directly to my brother, described within the corporate documentation as an official company vehicle. The remaining $7,000 had been classified generally as basic operating expenditures. The attorney managed to secure the line-by-line bank statements for those specific operating expenditures. 2 independent vacation trips to Las Vegas, including premium airfare and luxury resort accommodations, 6 separate dinner transactions at high-end restaurants in the city center, with not a single receipt falling below $100, a luxury electronic gaming system accompanied by 3 separate controllers, and a recurring monthly membership to an elite cigar importing club. My biological brother had stolen $47,000 utilizing my hard-earned identity and immediately expended the capital on a worthless piece of ground, a vehicle he used exclusively to drive to the local fueling station, and luxury vacations I would never experience myself. I did not strike the table surface. I did not shed a single tear. I calmly retrieved my pencil and systematically added every single line item transaction to my master tracking spreadsheet. Column A, item name. Column B, exact amount. Column C, information source. Column D, current legal status. The moment I concluded the entries, I closed my personal computer and thoroughly cleaned my beverage container. My brother had extracted every single ounce of value he could manage utilizing my identity, and my mother still loudly proclaimed him to be the absolute crown jewel of the entire family unit. That evening, I sat entirely alone at my kitchen table space with the original mortgage application document spread completely flat beneath the targeted illumination of my reading lamp. I positioned my official accounting license directly beside the paperwork. 2 distinct signatures, 2 completely different versions of my legal name, generated by 2 entirely separate pairs of hands. The signature appearing on my professional license was truly mine, clean, highly practiced, the initial character looping distinctly to the left side, the exact way it had since I initially mastered cursive writing in the 3rd grade from my elementary instructor at the local public school. The signature stamped across the fraudulent mortgage represented my brother's clumsy attempt. The physical characters were shaped reasonably well. The structural spacing was exceptionally close, but the initial loop traveled aggressively to the right side. It represented the precise type of technical error an individual makes if they have glanced at a signature 100 times, but completely failed to comprehend the actual human hand that executed the motion. I contemplated all 312 individual checks I had systematically generated and mailed over 8 full years. Every single one bore my authentic signature, executed entirely voluntarily, completely without receiving a word of appreciation, completely without a single note of validation. Not a single person within my biological family had ever analyzed those authentic signatures. No one had ever held a single check up to the ambient light. No one had ever preserved one in a frame or kept a record. They simply deposited the capital and immediately forgot the source. But this instance, this specific criminal forgery, constituted the absolute first time my signature actually carried immense significance to their lives. Not the authentic ones. Not the consistent entries that kept the electrical currents flowing, the roofing structure patched, and my father's medical protection policy active. The completely fabricated one. The single signature that unlocked $47,000 for an expensive truck and a trip to Nevada. That represented the specific signature they absolutely required. I stared intently at those 2 names resting beneath the bright lamplight for a prolonged duration. A financial burden who possessed the credit score to secure $47,000 instantly. I folded the application packet back into its protective envelope, deposited the file securely within the master real estate folder, and placed that folder deep inside my desk storage drawer. Following that, I extinguished the illumination, cleansed my teeth, and retired for the evening. I did not experience any dreams. I rarely do. But I awoke at exactly 5:15 the subsequent morning possessing a level of mental clarity I had not experienced in many years. It was not driven by emotional anger, it was not driven by deep sadness, it was pure, unadulterated arithmetic. My senior partner and I sat comfortably inside a booth at a local diner along the main thoroughfare. She was consuming a standard club sandwich. I was enjoying a hot beverage and a bowl of basic soup. "What exactly is your next course of action?" she inquired gently. "I am going to step back and allow the established legal system to execute its intended function. The official Federal Trade Commission documentation is fully submitted. The primary credit reporting bureaus are actively conducting their investigations. My attorney is thoroughly managing the financial cooperative. And I am entirely finished. Finished with what exactly? Absolutely all of it. The monthly checks, the mandatory family gatherings, the phone calls, and the master tracking spreadsheet containing recorded voice messages from individuals who firmly believe I owe my entire adult existence to my biological parents. I systematically ticked off the items. Automatic financial transfers completely terminated since the holiday feast. Total credit freeze fully implemented. Federal Trade Commission affidavit officially filed. All residential apartment locks completely replaced. Not because I harbored any realistic expectation that my brother would materialize at my door, but because the ancient lock mechanism was the specific unit my father had installed when I initially occupied the space, and I desired absolutely nothing within my reality that my biological family had physically touched. The incoming voice messages were systematically routed to a hidden storage folder, not to inflict emotional distress upon myself, but because every single message constituted official documentation, a clear behavioral pattern, and legal evidence if I ever required it in a court of law. My partner stirred her chilled beverage. And what becomes of the physical house? The residential structure is going to enter total default. Following that, it will proceed directly to the public auction block. And then I shifted my gaze directly toward her. She returned the gaze completely. My partner is 54 years old. She constructed our accounting firm from a simple folding table inside her personal garage space. She deeply comprehended what it signified to build a substantial reality out of absolute nothingness while critical individuals observed and waited expectantly for your operations to collapse entirely. My mother was actually entirely accurate regarding one specific metric, I remarked quietly. I functioned completely as a heavy burden, simply not the specific definition she intended. I represented the invisible foundational burden holding the entire structure aloft, and I have officially chosen to set it down. My partner nodded her head with slow deliberation. She didn't offer a cliché phrase like "excellent job" or "I am incredibly proud of you." Instead, she looked at me and said, "Consume your soup before it loses its heat. We have secured 3 entirely new corporate clients this week." I sat inside the traditional diner booth adjacent to my employer and uttered the word "finished" out loud for the very first time in my life. It was not delivered with emotional anger, it was not staged with theatrical drama, just completely finished. And here is the fundamental reality regarding reaching the point of being entirely finished. It fails to translate into a sensation of absolute freedom immediately. Initially, it resembles the sensation of a total free fall. But you discover exceptionally rapidly that you are not actually crashing down. You have simply stopped carrying the immense weight of everyone else's existence. If that specific concept carries profound meaning for your life right now, continue watching closely. My mobile unit began to ring at exactly 11:47 on a Tuesday evening. I came exceptionally close to allowing the communication to cease, but the display indicated it was my father. And my father never initiated contact late at night unless my mother was fully asleep. Sloan. His voice was exceptionally subdued. A low, muffled cadence resembling someone speaking from the basement level, or perhaps he had stepped outside onto the covered porch. I could distinctly discern the sound of wind moving through the line. I recognize that you are deeply upset. I completely comprehend the underlying reasons. I maintained absolute verbal silence. I truly should have spoken up at that dining table. I should have voiced my objections a very long time ago. Still, absolute silence emanated from my end. The heavy silence belonged entirely to him to fill with words, not to me. Your mother, she endured an exceptionally challenging existence following your birth. She completely relinquished her professional position at the agricultural equipment dealership. She operated as the absolute premier sales professional in the entire region, and she walked away from that success entirely because we lacked the aggregate resources to finance childcare for 2 separate youth. She never truly recovered from that sacrifice. That represents her personal narrative, father. It does not constitute my story. I recognize that. Another prolonged pause ensued. Significantly longer this time around. The wind velocity increased on his end of the connection. He was definitely standing outdoors. I recognize that you fully deserved a far better experience than what transpired that evening. A far better existence than all of it. I waited patiently. But you simply cannot allow the residential structure to be lost, child. It constitutes absolutely everything we possess in this world. There it finally emerged. The core request. The singular underlying purpose for the late-night communication. Not to offer a genuine, unadulterated apology. Not in a true sense. Simply to acknowledge just enough historical pain to keep the financial resources flowing smoothly. He had articulated the correct words, but they were deployed entirely in the service of an incorrect petition. Have a peaceful evening, Father. Sloan, please. Good night. I terminated the connection immediately, positioned the mobile unit face down on my bedside table, adjusted the covers upward, and stared directly at the dark ceiling. Just prior to his final plea, in that precise half-second interval between his words, I had discerned a vocal element I had never once detected from him throughout my entire existence. It might have represented genuine internal regret. It might have simply represented the movement of the wind. Right before the connection was severed, just barely perceptible through the speaker. Please ensure you do not inform your mother that I initiated this contact. He possessed affection for me. I truly believe that reality. But he possessed a far greater affection for his personal domestic quietude. Exactly 60 days following that holiday gathering, the financial cooperative officially dispatched a formal notice of total default to the family address. 90 days to fully cure the outstanding balance or the corporate entity would officially initiate public foreclosure proceedings. I possess this knowledge because my mother explained the situation, not via direct communication, but through the 11 independent voice messages she recorded in a single calendar day. The behavioral progression was completely textbook. 9 a.m., child, please contact me immediately. We have received an official communication from the financial institution. 10:15, this situation is incredibly critical. Your father is exceptionally distressed. 11:30, your current actions are systematically destroying this entire family unit. 1 p.m., the Almighty will judge you severely for this behavior, child. He observes every action. 3:45, her voice explicitly cracking with emotion, I deeply wish I had never brought you into this world. I listened completely. I logged the entries. I erased the files. The identical spreadsheet log, the identical columns, the exact same flat emotional effect. Date, February 2nd. Caller identity, Linda Juergens. Aggregate messages, 11. Emotional arc, transitioning rapidly from desperate pleading to heavy accusation, then to theological condemnation, and finally to raw, unadulterated resentment. However, there existed another independent communication that specific day that captured my full professional attention. My brother initiated contact, yet his vocal delivery was entirely distinct. It wasn't driven by aggressive anger, it wasn't focused on making demands, the voice was visibly trembling. Listen, regarding that secondary loan transaction on the residential structure, the specific note from the financial cooperative. We really need to sit down and discuss that situation. I comprehended the underlying tremor within his vocal delivery immediately. My brother wasn't actually terrified of losing the physical residential structure. He was completely terrified of what the financial institution's fraud division would uncover the moment they initiated a forensic investigation into the secondary mortgage note, the specific document bearing my completely forged signature. If the bank executed a comprehensive review, they would inevitably uncover the absolute forgery. If they uncovered the forgery, they would inevitably expose the accomplice's fraudulent legal notarization. If they exposed the accomplice, they would inevitably uncover the underlying limited liability company structure. And if they uncovered the corporate entity, they would discover precisely where the $47,000 had been spent. Nevada Vacations, a brand new pickup truck, and a digital entertainment console. Direct your conversation toward your legal representative, brother. I immediately terminated the connection. He did not attempt to contact my line again for 6 full weeks.